The Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.
I want to congratulate the United States of America, the American people, and our American partners on Independence Day. This day is especially important for us. Prime Minister of Georgia, Irakli Kobakhidze, told journalists at the event held in connection with the Independence Day of the United States of America. According to the head of the government, there were several years that damaged the relations between the two states, and the Georgian side wants to restart the relations. Natural gas exports from Azerbaijan to Georgia continue to decrease, while from Russia increased in 2024 like the previous year. According to the data from the National Statistics Office of Georgia, between January and May 2024, Georgia bought natural gas worth up to $87 million from Russia, which was an annual increase of around 12%, while exports from Azerbaijan decreased by 35%, amounting to up to $119 million. As a result of investigative activities carried out by the representatives of the Investigation Service of the Ministry of Finance of Georgia, criminal prosecution was initiated against one person on the fact of deliberate tax evasion committed in particularly large quantities. Investigation determined that the accused person, in order to receive illegal material benefit in violation of the tax legislation, was systematically incorrectly declaring income of the company under his management, in which way he avoided the tax belonging to the state budget, the principal amount of which equals up to $1.5 million lari. Investigation is underway under the second part of the Article 218 of the Criminal Code of Georgia, which envisages imprisonment from 5 to 8 years. It is important that we continue to engage with appropriate officials of the Georgian government to have a range of issues that we want to prioritize in the context of that bilateral relationship with them, said Principal Deputy Spokesperson of the U.S. Department of State, Vedant Patel, at the daily press briefing on July the 1st. The spokesperson answered the question of Alex Rafaglu, an Azerbaijani-American journalist, researcher, and press freedom advocate who focuses on Eurasia. This is The Checkpoints. I'm Elena Gvangelashvili, author and the host of the show, and the Checkpoints team is ready to sum up Business and Economics Week for you. This week, BMG had an exclusive interview with Mark Clayton, British ambassador to Georgia. His 4-year tenure is coming to an end. His successor arrives in Georgia in mid-August, so I think Georgi Sakadze and I used our time quite efficiently to ask what seems to be our last questions to Mark Clayton on UK-Georgia relations, on the impact of Russian law, on investment sentiments and expectations, and many more.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. Pleasure to get prepared finally for this interview.
I know, it's a bit late, but I'm really glad to do it.
Thank you so much.
We are too.
We are too, yes.
Yes, and let us begin then. My first question, Mr. Ambassador, considering the context in which we all of us are today, whose interest have you and the embassy been serving in Georgia for all of these years? Is it a Georgian interest, or is it a foreign interest, with all the programs considering that we are looking at very, very closely at BMG?
Oh, I think that's a really good question. I'm really clear. I'm here to represent the United Kingdom in Georgia, and I take immense pride in doing that. There aren't, I think wherever you work as an ambassador, it is an immense privilege to represent your country overseas. But honestly, I can think of there are a few better places to do that than in Georgia. I'm coming to the end of my 4 years here now, and it's been wonderful. We can talk about that a little later. So I'm here to represent my country, but I'm also very clear.
The objective of this embassy is really clear. It is to support Georgia's progress towards EU and NATO membership. Why do we do that? we've said, for 30 years, I've been really clear, and the United Kingdom has been really clear, we support Georgia's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Sovereignty is about making your own choices in the world. Everything I see, every opinion poll I read says the Georgian people want to join the EU and NATO. Every major political party says that that is their main goal, to take Georgia forward to EU and NATO membership. And it's also, of course, written in your constitution. So I think I'm here to represent the United Kingdom, but very clearly the entire work of this embassy is geared towards supporting those goals, which is what the Georgian people say they want.
Yes, so Brexit wasn't a fight against the global war party then.
So look, I get asked this a lot. I'm really comfortable with the fact that the United Kingdom chose to leave the European Union, yet also I'm really comfortable at the same time supporting Georgia's aspirations to join.
And you see that the window of opportunity for Georgia?
Well, hang on. I think the first thing is, when I say I support Georgia's sovereignty, that's what it's about. It was the sovereign choice of the British people to decide to leave. What I see in Georgia is the sovereign choice of the Georgian people is to join. So if I'm serious about supporting Georgia's sovereignty and integrity, then I'm fully behind that goal. But I missed the second part of the question.
No, and you see EU integration as the window of opportunity for Georgia with its shaky institutions.
I think there is a tremendous opportunity there for Georgia. Look, I can't speak on behalf of the European Union, but I note that just this week, Moldova and Ukraine opened accession negotiations. My German colleague put it very well in one of his Twitter points, Georgia could have been there, right? This could have been Georgia. And it's a real shame for me that Georgia is not further along that path. But for as long as Georgia wants to join the EU and NATO, certainly this embassy, I'm confident, will continue working to that goal.
How can we evaluate Georgia's current status, Mr. Ambassador, on our way to EU? I do understand your diplomatic approach, and in advance I can hear some details of your possible answer, but at the same time, here we have the situation where everything is fixed within our constitution. Some wills towards EU, NATO are declared, but at the same time, what we see last several months, maybe even more, year and a half ago, while the first attempt, so the so-called Russian law, let me say so, it describes absolutely on a different way ourselves. So where do we stand? Where is Georgia so far in this regards?
So what I see is that across society there is tremendous support for joining the European Union. And I also know, your government have also been very clear that remains their aspiration. But I would also draw attention, and again, it's really for European Union colleagues to comment on this, but you've asked, Georgi. But I would also draw attention to, there is a chorus of opinion from Georgia's friends and partners who I think have done nothing but work for Georgia's future over the last 30 years. There is a chorus of opinion that has cautioned against adopting the law on transparency of foreign influence in its current form. And I can only highlight what the High Representative Joseph Borrell said last week. Georgia's progress towards EU accession is, I think he said, de facto frozen because of that law. So I think if Georgia wants to move forward, then it will need to look again at that legislation and decide how it wants to make further progress. But at the moment, I think the European Union have been extremely clear that that law is incompatible with the requirements of European Union membership. But this is not for me as the United Kingdom. We're in a slightly separate category, but that's my observation.
But British Foreign Office, they also fixed their opinion, and it was quite clear and
yes, completely.
completely. I mean.
So I can tell you, look, but you asked about the accession process. I mean, when it comes to what that law means for UK activities in Georgia, right, I am really clear. It risks, I think, significantly damaging a lot of the good work that we do in Georgia to support Georgian goals, right? One of the big areas of work that we support is supporting reconciliation with communities in Abkhazia and South Ossetia across the ABLs, right? We deliver that support in a variety of manners, right? Some of that is my colleagues stand up regularly in the OSCE and stand up in defence of Georgia's sovereignty. At the UN recently, the UK yet again co-sponsored the Georgian resolution on return of IDPs, right? So we put our, politically, we make our stance in support of Georgia very clear, but then we also put our money where our mouth is and we support community organisations who are working to build ties across those divides, right? They are going to be labelled foreign agents under this law. Now, I don't think that's right. They're working in support of a Georgian government policy of reconciliation across the ABLs. And the risk with this law is that they are going to be stigmatised and some of that work will stop.
What could change the behavior of GD officials? Because, you know, this is a very clear example what price might Georgia pay because of this just one law. Why aren't you heard? And in you, I mean the whole partners, strategic partners of Georgia. And do you think sanctions are the tool, like the effective tool to change this behavior in the short term?
So that's a really good question. You will have to ask Georgian Dream officials as to their rationale behind that law. I've heard it. You know, lots of them have talked about transparency. I think the arguments in return would be actually there is a huge amount of transparency in the civil society sector, and also, frankly, the Georgian state has access to huge amounts of information about the financial flows of civil society organisations. Donors provide that. Civil society organisations themselves publicise it. We share that information directly with the government's donor coordination unit, so the information is out there. So I think the information is out there.
Yes.
Look, when it comes to sanctions, clearly some of the UK's closest allies and partners have already imposed restrictions and measures against Georgia. You know, one of the reasons that it took some time to arrange this interview was the UK is right in the middle of an election campaign right now. So it will be for a new UK government to decide what our own position will be on any measures. And I'm not going to speculate any further because our election is on Thursday and it would be not appropriate for me to go into any more details on that. I'm not dodging the question. I think it's an absolutely legitimate question. But we operate, and it's interesting, you know, the United Kingdom, we operate on extremely clear rules during our election campaign. And there's a reason for that, and I'm saying it because I think it's interesting for a Georgian perspective, right?
Correct.
The government, my government, effectively stops public messaging during an election campaign. The reason for that is to allow the British people, they deserve to have as maximum information about the choices which stand before them in the election.
Focus on local elections.
And it should, well, not only that, Georgi, it's about if the government is allowed to communicate as normal in an election campaign, that will skew that playing field in favour of the incumbent government. So the government of the day steps back to give the space out there for the parties to make their case to the British people. And I like that. That means that the British people will go into their elections on Thursday with as much information as possible.
We totally understand.
But my point, but it's interesting in terms of, you know, Georgia is going to face some big choices in October, and I think it's interesting for me always. What works in one country won't work everywhere, but I think that is a really nice tradition that we have.
By October, you will not be here.
Sadly not. I will be in the United Kingdom in October, yeah.
And
in my next job. But my successor, Gareth, is arriving in the middle of August, and he will be firing on all cylinders.
by the way, what I've heard about him, about his brilliant Georgian speaking.
Gareth has had the privilege of 2 years learning Georgian, so he is going to be Zayan Kargi.
Zalyanka.
Zayan Georgia.
But you're progressing as well.
Yeah, I'm still.
You plan to practice in Georgian further, or what's going to be your...
My opportunities are going to be limited,
Yeah.
but there are some really good Georgian restaurants in London, so I won't go without completely.
And what's going to be your next step for your career?
So I'll be
professional?
taking...
Is it already clear for you?
Yeah, so I'll be taking up a position in our headquarters, but one of my responsibilities will be Georgia, so I will keep my hand in.
Wow.
So I don't know whether you want to use any of this in your TV, but I'm going to be head of the department which, amongst other countries, is responsible for Georgia. So I get to take a keen interest in your elections.
So we'll continue.
From
Kartulat
London, not from
Labaraki.
here. Yeah. I care passionately about Georgia. I have had 4 fantastic years here. I think we've done a really... UK-Georgia relations are in an extremely good place, despite all the challenges. So I'm really pleased that I'm going to be able to carry on working on a country that I care deeply about.
Wonderful, and let's continue that line. What have been like the main challenges working in Georgia for you personally, and what the opportunities, and what do you think was the greatest achievement of your tenure here in Georgia?
That's a really good question. So look, in terms of challenges, I arrived in the middle, actually in the early stages of COVID.
Correct.
And that was a huge limit on everything that anybody could do. Obviously, with the end of COVID, what I've seen is just a blossoming of the UK's relationship with Georgia in every respect. Like, tourism numbers are up, even though we haven't got direct flights back since pre-COVID. There are more British tourists visiting Georgia than there were pre-COVID when we had direct flights. Like, business is booming. Our trade volumes are up another 10%, £500 million total trade in both directions. The people-to-people links are coming back, not only in terms of tourism, but whether it's in culture. The Victoria and Albert Museum are coming to Georgia next week to do training with your National Museum. And that's before you get on to the defence, the security, the other relationships. So wherever I look, choosing one highlight is actually really hard, because what I've seen is right across the breadth of that relationship, we are operating at a different level.
Yes, but we are interested in business
Yes.
more. So what has changed since UK-Georgia Strategic Partnership and Cooperation Agreement and Free Trade with Georgia after the Brexit? This entered in force in 2021, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken. What have these 3 years shown as the tendency? Is there interest there?
So I think there's a few things. The first thing is, that agreement, it was the first agreement that we signed after Brexit with any country in the world. I think that's testimony to the strength of that really strong partnership between the UK and Georgia. It has formed the basis for a blossoming and growing trade relationship. As I said, the trade in total, both bilateral trade is up around 10% each year, £500 million last year. Good, I think, for our trade balance is it's broadly evenly split between UK exports to Georgia and vice versa. That's quite healthy. Heavily on services, some really good goods. Whether you see Land Rovers driving around Tbilisi and Georgia, those are all British exports. JCB diggers, they're out there constructing, contributing to Georgia's boom. So it's been really solid, but what's really positive about it is we've also had some trade committee meetings, 2 in the last 3 years, which allow us to get into the details and tackle any regulatory challenges, which will, any barriers that we face, we can remove those and hopefully expand the relationship further in the future.
Mr. Ambassador, is it important? I mean, are investors or businesses or those who want to trade with Georgia asking you what's going on in Georgia, whether the course is changing or not?
Yeah.
Are these like Western values important for trade, for doing business?
You know the answer to that. Yes, it's absolutely crucial. So, and I think this is, I've raised this with your government, you know, from a, just from a narrow UK business point of view, right? The UK is one of the biggest foreign investors in Georgia. You know, the numbers go up and down every year, but fundamentally because some of your biggest banks and biggest companies are listed in London. Those are British investments. So we're a significant player on the investment side. Those British companies have seen hundreds of millions of pounds wiped off their value since the unrest and instability brought about by the introduction of the law recently. What has particularly concerned investors is the use of violence and intimidation. You know, we have condemned that as a UK government, but in a way, you know, British investors and institutional investors look at what's happening, they draw their conclusions, and they take their money out. So again, I learned this, you will know this really well, I learned this recently, right? So Georgia is still, for all of its amazing prospects, Georgia is still a small market. The big investors don't have country specialists who really get, you know, understand Georgia like you do and like I now do after 4 years. What do they do when they look at the prospects? They will look at the financial information about the companies that they're looking at investing in, and then they read the Financial Times, The Economist, The Guardian, other international press. And let's be honest, right? The coverage of Georgia in the international media at the moment is not positive. It is instability, it's violence, it's attacks on civil society activists. So the safest thing for investors to do is take their money out.
Football might have helped us.
Our team,
It may have done. It may have done. That's probably the most generous I can be. But the coverage, you know, apart from the football, the coverage of Georgia in recent months has not been positive, and that has an impact. And that concerns me as someone who cares about Georgia. It concerns me as the British ambassador here because it's impacting on British companies. And what is really hard, what I think is hardest on this, Elena, is, you know, it's the deals which didn't happen because of that.
Exactly, the alternative.
Now I don't, you know, I'm not going into it, but I'm aware of at least a couple of decent, significant deals which at the moment, you know, I don't think at the moment, at least the best you can say is they're on pause because of concerns not only about what's happened, but also concerns about the prospects for your elections in the autumn.
What role do have international sanctions also in all of this? Like when investors are looking at the countries these days, are they concerned whether, you know, there might be some international sanction evasions or whatever? In this sphere, Georgia is in a tough position because it has the same border with Russia, and this might also be like enough for the doubts. But.
So, there are different layers to this, right? Let me be clear. I have been, you know, the United Kingdom, alongside the EU and US, has worked really closely with Georgia on the implementation of sanctions against Russia. And although Georgia has not imposed its own sanctions, Georgia is doing a really good job in working hard to support our implementation of our sanctions. So actually, across the board, whether it is with your National Bank, Ministry of Finance, elsewhere, what we've actually got is some really good positive cooperation, sharing experience, sharing best practice, training, support, engagement, dialogue, all of which gives me confidence that Georgia is doing as much as it can to implement sanctions. But when it comes to sanctions on Russia, that is a moving target, of course, and for as long as sanctions are implemented, the longer this goes on, the more pressure there is to try and find a way around them, which is why I'm really keen that we are going to keep that dialogue going with Georgia about those sanctions. But what you're asking is about sanctions on Georgians and Georgia itself because of the law and pressure on democracy.
That was my first question.
Yes, I know, but I
Yes.
mean, it's important to put on the record, I think, that, actually, when it comes to the Russia sanctions, for all of the narrative out there that, Georgia is a conduit for sanctions circumvention, we actually have a really positive relationship, working relationship with the Ministry of Finance, Customs, helping us implement our sanctions alongside our EU and US colleagues. When it comes to sanctions on Georgians, then that's a slightly different matter, and of course, that is, the prospect of sanctions on Georgia in itself plays on investors' minds. I'm certain of that. They have raised the question with me. That, and crucially, and I think it's really important to emphasize, the prospect of violence. The violence and intimidation that we have seen is appalling. The United Kingdom has spoken out about it. That sort of orchestrated campaign of intimidation is extremely worrying. And in discussions just very recently with investors, they've been clear to me that as much as the sanctions, that is what really concerns them. Because what does it say about the sort of system that is in place? You have to crack down on that violence. Absolutely. There can be no place for that in a modern democracy.
These 9 points, we don't get to talk about it much now in the shade of this law. But which reforms would you identify as key reforms that could strengthen the trust of UK investors, business people in Georgia's investment environment?
I think it's a good question, because I think they're all, in a way, they are all interlinked, right, as a package. And it's been very interesting to me. So look, I've been challenged about the UK's own consideration of laws and regulations on foreign influence in the UK system, right? I've been questioned on that in the past. Those regulations are not in place. As I said, we are in an election period. It will be for a new government to decide how to take that forward. But the reason I say it's very hard to choose one of those 9 steps, because the system is interlinked, right? You can have a law, the United Kingdom. If the United Kingdom imposes a law, there will be some elements of our law which will be open to interpretation. So what do you do in the United Kingdom if the basic answer is, I'll see you in court. But then seeing you in court works if you have an independent court system which everyone has confidence in the independence and neutrality of a court system. So why is it that so many of the commercial deals that take place in Georgia are actually done under English law? Because of absolute confidence in that English law system. So I wouldn't identify one single one of those 9 steps as being more important than another. And I think it's also important for me as the British ambassador, obviously not a member of the European Union, but I strongly support Georgia's membership of NATO, just as I support the membership of the EU. Those 9 points in some shape or form are generally really important for Georgia's NATO membership. NATO is a political and military organization. Possibly as a result of Russian propaganda, all the emphasis is on the tanks and the military, but it is a political organization of countries that share values. So those democratic values and principles are equally important for Georgia's NATO membership as they are EU.
Yes.
And again, I can't choose one over the other. They're all important taken together.
Yes, so you are linking Georgia's NATO membership possible also with the economic stability in the country and economic security.
Not necessarily economic stability, but the sort of health of Georgia's democracy is absolutely crucial. It is a crucial requirement for NATO membership, just as it is for EU membership.
Exactly.
2 points, Mr. Ambassador, from my side. First is your current engagement and ongoing programs, or maybe constant or permanent participation as a consultant, as an advisors, as a program providers for Georgian government and for our political system. You mentioned about your permanent relations with Georgian revenue system, Ministry of Finance, things like that. I do understand that. At the same time, we all know and are aware about British government support for Georgian agriculture and things like. But at the same time, what I'd like to identify and deliver from this interview is, are there some other specific programs like you are covering maybe within the Ministry of Defense? What are the current ongoing programs with the Georgian government, or maybe they're also suspended?
Basically, across a broad front, the UK has worked with Georgia in support of its ongoing reforms and progress towards EU and NATO membership. A lot of our support has been quite heavily weighted on the defence and security side. Some of it doesn't come with a pound sign attached. So, for example, this is going back some time now, before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But whenever a Royal Naval ship was in the Black Sea, they always would do a port call in Georgia, right? HMS Defender was the last Royal Naval destroyer in the Black Sea. Costs about £1 billion, that ship. I think its running costs are, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of pounds a day. She was alongside in Batumi for about 4 days, right? So if I tot up the time and, you know, you're millions of pounds, but we don't count it like that. But they were in Georgia training your Coast Guard to allow to bring your Coast Guard up to a NATO international operating standard to allow them to deploy in support of NATO operations. So, well, we can't put Royal Naval vessels in the Black Sea since Russia's invasion of Ukraine because of the implementation of the Montreux Convention. But what I'm saying is, you know, we don't. So there are lots of things which go on. I was in Poti. I mean, this is another Coast Guard by coincidence, but I was in Poti last month, right? 10 Royal Marines, I think, about 10 Royal Marines training your Coast Guard on the next level of, you know, helping them keep up their currency, right? There's no, we don't put a pound sign on that, but when you tot up, you know, their time, you know, it adds up. So across the board, there is a lot of stuff going on now. Given developments and given our own election, some of that is paused, and we will wait to see what my new government wants to do in terms of how it wants to take forward its relations with Georgia.
I want you kindly and to remember just a few months ago, a few meetings with the Prime Minister of Georgia, together with your colleagues, Ambassador Hetchinsky, Ambassador Denegan. We've heard afterwards some excellent diplomatic answers about these meetings, but we remember a few of them. At least myself, what I can remember, it was 2 of them, what I remember. Maybe it was more, but definitely it was 2. This interview is for some clearness, not just in relations, but also our society to be aware of. This meeting was meeting for the meeting, or it was honest meeting of the partners who might have some difficult period of relations right now. But what I'm trying to ask you, Ambassador, is the following. Was that absolutely honest meeting between parties? Were all the questions raised there? I mean, what do I mean in all the questions? I'm not saying only about the law of the foreign influence or things like that. I'm talking about, I don't know, global war party, things like that. I mean, did you have a conversation with the partners or it was just, I don't know, meeting for the meeting and diplomatic approach?
My team would I never just do meetings for the sake of meetings. So look, I think the essence of my day job, I call it diplomacy, the essence is having those conversations, sharing views, talking, being honest and open, right? I don't think there is any point in not being honest and open. I'm being honest and open with you now. So no, it's not just that. I'm not going to go into the details of any single meeting, but I can tell you now, in my meetings with a range of representatives of Georgian government, I have been extremely clear about my concerns about the law and its impact on our own activity in Georgia, most of which, which is designed to support Georgia's objectives, right? I've been clear about that. I've been clear about the concern that we have. I have been clear about why the current law as it's been adopted is not the same as our law, which is not yet in force anyway. So I'm really confident that I've had those healthy, open conversations. I have raised the Global War Party in those meetings, and I've raised my real concerns individually. As the British ambassador, I've raised my concerns about the damage that the attacks on the UK's closest allies and partners in the shape of the US and EU, I've raised the damage that that does to Georgia's prospects, I suppose, on the EU and NATO front.
And all your diplomacy does not allow you to share with us, because it was not just messages delivered, but as you just mentioned, it was conversation. What was the feedback from the Georgian party, or we just should ask them?
Well, you should ask them, but yes. I can tell you now, I mean, the conversations I've had, your government have been very clear about the reasons they say that they are, the reasons they say they are pushing, they have adopted the law. And the reasons I've been given in private are no different to the reasons that actually you hear in the public. Right? The arguments are a focus on transparency, etc. I'm extremely concerned about the impact of this.
Do you consider that all the steps taken, I mean, all these laws adopted by the Georgian parliament and some decisions coming from the government, it might be a part of some balancing the situation, what is happening regionally or around, or it just changing the course of the country?
So I think it's very clear, right? So a couple of years back, the UK issued a new strategic review of defence, security, development, foreign policy. Effectively the UK's foreign policy doctrine documents, which covers both our foreign policy and defence and development policies and strategies. In all of these sort of recent documents, the people talk about the world becoming more contested, more unstable, a more dangerous place. And I think so much of that, lands at Georgia's doorstep, right? You have Russia invading Ukraine without any justification. You've just had conflict right next door between two of your neighbours, leading to Azerbaijan's recovery of Karabakh. Not far away, you have real instability and conflict in the Middle East with Hamas's horrendous attack on Israel and Israel's response. And you don't have to get much further before you get onto non-state actors in the shape of the Houthis attacking shipping in the Red Sea. Georgia is in a tough neighbourhood. It is unstable, and these things are playing out right on Georgia's doorstep. So I think Georgia is in a tough region. I think it has, throughout centuries, it's had to manage relationships with a whole bunch of important, powerful neighbours. But I would come back to the point, Georgia has been very clear. Similarly, despite that region, for centuries, Georgia has had that striving to get closer and build ties with Europe. And that is a fantastic prospect which is there now for the taking. So, and that's what, I'm fully behind that.
Continuing this line and in this context, how do you evaluate Georgia-China relations, strategic relations, now Anacleia port and Chinese investments in Anacleia port? Does it worry you at any stage, or what is your take on that?
So, look, China is a tremendous global player, and the United Kingdom has an extremely, a very large economic relationship with China, just as many countries do, and clearly Georgia is trying to develop that. My concern around that would be what we've seen in other places around the world is that those investments come with strings attached. So I think what is really important, where does the UK come on this, right? Georgia has been nothing, if not for centuries, that link between East and West, trading nation. Of course, it is in Georgia's genes probably, and it's probably genetic, that Georgia plays a role in linking East and West and supporting that trade. The UK was absolutely rock solid behind the pipelines, Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan in the past. We now firmly support Georgia's aspirations to be a key part of the Middle Corridor. So obviously I'd prefer it if there were British investments there, because I'm here to fly the flag for Britain. I'd hope that British companies were involved in that development. Thank
you so much for your time, Mr. Ambassador. And
pleasure.
Probably our last question. What is your main message today for our viewers and followers? What do you want to be remembered as the main message of this interview today?
I think the main message is actually, I'm going to hark back. So you asked me earlier about the shape and size of the UK's relationship with Georgia. What I am really pleased about is that in my time here, we've had a range of visits from senior government ministers, culminating in my Foreign Secretary's visit last year, which was the first visit by a Foreign Secretary to Georgia for, since about 2016, really long time. And the reason I raise that is because James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary at the time, ended up one of his speeches with the UK is a firm friend of Georgia. And I think that's the main message. The UK is a firm friend of Georgia. Whatever aspect there is, however Georgia develops, there is a rock-solid partnership there that we are committed to. It will evolve over time. I hope it will grow. The shape of it might look different over time, with more emphasis in one area than another. But bottom line, the UK stands with Georgia in support of your independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity. That's the main message.
Perfect ending. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
What was new in business this week? Natia Taktakishvili will tell us more.
A new facility, Zegbar, started operating in Dedina Park just a few months ago. Zegbar is a multifunctional space that offers its customers various events. As the founder of Zegbar, Alexandre Ramishvili, told BMG TV, despite the fact that the bar is newly open, demand for it is gradually increasing. He declares that it's possible to host 300 people in the indoor space, while about 300 people can be accommodated on the terrace. We offer our guests mainly European cuisine, although we also have Georgian elements. The reason for placing Zegbar in Dedina Park was that it was a good location, easily accessible to everyone. Moreover, we can play music loudly until the morning, Ramishvili said. The founder of the facility talks about the challenges in the hospitality sector and states that the service in the country still needs to be improved, and qualified staff is a big problem. It should be noted that Zegbar is one of the facilities of Status Group. The group itself includes a total of 6 facilities in Tbilisi. The managing partner of DIO declares that the demand for repair materials in the region has increased. Tamas Davutoglu notes that the company's portfolio includes 80 products and most of them are produced in the factories operated in Georgia. The demand in the region is increasing. For example, demand in Kutaisi was sluggish and now it has become active. About 60% of our products come from individuals. However, we also work on project orders and serve the hospitality sector, hospitals and auto businesses. DIO has products suitable for particularly all segments. The managing partner of DIO said Tamas Davutoglu draws attention to the country's successful cooperation with TBC Bank, which counts 16 years. As he notes, over the years they have been developing their business with the help of bank. DIO brand includes about 80 products, some of which are locally produced, while others are imported. Construction materials are most in-demand products. In terms of sales, we are very strongly represented in solar protection systems. People think that protection from the sun should only be done from the inside, but the modern approach is that protection from the sun should be made from the outside, because saving electricity on cooling is 10 times more effective when we protect the building from the outside, not from the inside. In the future, the price of electricity will increase even more, and we must take care to use smart technologies as energy savers, says Davutoglu. General Director of Georgia states that the logistic costs of the company have grown. As Tornike Guruli notes with BMG TV, the prices have not yet increased, but the company will have to adjust product costs. The exchange rate has changed. Logistic costs have increased. Through negotiations with suppliers, we are trying to maintain prices. If the exchange rate increases sharply, we will be forced to adjust the prices, Tornike Guruli says. According to Tornike Guruli, sales increased by 20% between January and June. The main supplier is Turkey. We produce less materials in Georgia. It's mainly imported from abroad. The main supplier is Turkey, followed by China. India has become more active as a tile manufacturer country for the recent period. We also import from Central Europe. As for sales, we expect it to increase. If we look at Tbilisi, Batumi and regions, construction is actively underway. This means that customers will need repair products in the future as well. The demand will increase by 20%, Tornike Guruli said. According to Galton Taggart, the revenue of repair materials sector has grown to $2 billion in 6 years. Imports of materials are increasing more than the local production. Iberia Business Group is ready to enter the Uzbekistan market. However, due to the objective circumstances, the company cannot start operations in this Central Asia country. Dariel Khachikashvili, the founder of Iberia Business Group, announced the utilization of Uzbekistan market at the beginning of the last year and said that Mitsubishi decided to expand to Asia market and chose Iberia Business Group as a partner, which was a great trust for the company. We are ready to enter the Uzbekistan market. We have a very strong partner. The agreement is valid. The only challenge is technical problem, which is being adapted to local legislation. As soon as this issue is resolved, we will start operating in this interesting country, Dariel Khachikashvili said. The founder of the company also notes that despite the election year, the first half of the year was positive for the company operating in auto business. Our management and financial department planned these sales correctly. We have at least 30% better results than intended. This gives us a reason for optimism. That's the second half of the year we close on a positive note. The most important thing for us is to offer our customers new models that our brands have in Europe, Asia or other direction, Khachikashvili explained. IBG Holding is the official representative of such well-known international brands as Volkswagen, Audi, Skoda, Kia and Mitsubishi. Wine-producing company Necrosi Estate is working on the expansion of the export markets. Otto Tabatadze, the company's founder, told BMDG about this. According to him, the winery was founded in 2019. The company purchased a land area of 5 hectares near the oldest monastery in Kakheti, where the planted several varieties of grapes, Saperavi, Katsiteli and Green. It should be noted that the company has been exporting to America as well as to South Korea, Latvia and France. It's planned to start negotiations with the Chinese market this year. The vineyard where we grow grapes is located in Kidzmarauli microzone. We produce wine Katsiteli, Green as well as Kupagi, so we bring Kisi as Saperavi and Guzani varieties from Kartli region. We buy a large part of raw materials from Kakheti, Kartli and Imereti, while Katsiteli, Saperavi and Green are from our vineyards. In total, we produce 40,000 bottles of wine per year, which are exported to America, South Korea, Latvia and France. However, this year we are starting negotiations with several companies in the Chinese market to expand the export markets, Tabataze said. According to him, they invested about $500,000 in total to develop winemaking. The estate combines a winery, hotel and a restaurant. Hotel and restaurant Dakidula was opened in Ambrolauri municipality. The project combines 9 eco-friendly cottages and restaurant space. As the co-founder of the project, Zuka Manjgaladze, said during his visit to TV program Real Estate Prospect, the total volume of the implemented investment exceeds 1 million lari. Dakidula accepts guests from the current month. At the moment, the accommodation price for 2 persons with breakfast is 190 lari. We offer our customers premier eco-friendly cottages. We have a total of 9 such cottages. All of them are identical in size with small differences in details. At first, the goal was to make it for couples, but due to the demand, we added a sofa bed to cottages to accommodate a third person. The investment in the project has already exceeded 1 million lari. Our goal is to open many new spaces and constantly offer new products to the customers in the coming years, said Manjgaladze. According to Manjgaladze, during high season, the accommodation price in the cottage will exceed 220 lari. Christina Meskhadze, owner of Boutique Apartment Signature Hotel in Kutaisi, says that bookings are up 10% for summer. However, as she mentioned in an interview with BMDG, the cancellation of flights by Wizz Air had a great impact on the load growth during the tourist season. Accordingly, the hotel is fully loaded for this summer. Like last year, we keep the number of tourists stable. During the summer period, the hotel is fully booked. However, we offer additional services to our customers to maintain existing flows and to attract new ones. It's not easy, but the market fluctuation pushed us to act. In terms of percentage, in spring we had a decrease of 30%, but in summer we have a 10% increase compared to the previous year. Last year there were more tourists from Parisian Gulf countries, while we try to focus on European ones. In terms of percentage, the share of tourists from Parisian Gulf countries is 40%, followed by tourists from Europe in the range of 30%, Kazakhstan, Belarus 15%, Georgia 10%, and other countries 10% as well, says the owner of the hotel. As for the challenges, Boutique Apartment Signature claims that the staff shortage is still a significant problem for this season. Finally, Binechi is working on an expansion of export markets. Soso Bitsadze, the company's sales manager, told BMDG about this. According to him, the winery was established in Zahesi in 1995. However, after the sale, the company was rebranded, started selling its wine in 2017. As of the company's sales manager, the company sells its products in the local market and cooperates with HoReCa sector through its own distribution line. Binechi wines are exported to China, America, Baltic countries and Russia. We make a focus on Georgian wine varieties from Kartli, Kakheti, Imereti, Samegrelo and Lechkhumi. The enterprise is located in Zahesi. We produce an average of 300,000 bottles of wine per year. The main part of vineyards is planted in Kakheti and Samegrelo. Products are sold through our distribution line. In addition, we are actively represented in the HoReCa sector. We expect to China, America, Baltic countries and Russia this year. We plan to add new markets. Now we have negotiations with France and Germany, said the sales manager. Bitsadze also talks about the problems and states that due to the bad weather, the company did not get good harvest for the last 2 vintages. Winery Binechi employs about 30 people at this stage.
This week, Georgia's strategic partner, the United States of America, celebrated its Independence Day. U.S. Independence Day 2024, celebrated on July 4th, will mark 248 years since the adoption of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. This national holiday commemorates the birth of the United States as an independent nation, with festivities including fireworks, parades, concerts, and family gatherings across the country. In Tbilisi, U.S. Ambassador to Georgia, Robin Dunnigan, addressed the attendees at the U.S. Independence Day reception.
I'd like to start this evening's celebration by congratulating the team that has brought all of Georgia, and so many of us who love Georgia, so much joy and optimism. Gilotsov to Georgia's national soccer, or to you football team, for the historic showing in the European Championships. The core of the American dream is the belief that if you live in a free society and you work hard, then you can create a better life for your children and future generations. This belief and optimism are the core of the American spirit. And I believe these are also the core of the Georgian spirit.
Let us now review Georgia-U.S. relations in figures. The trade turnover between Georgia and the USA decreased from USD 781 million to over $640 million between January and May. But the reduction was due to the sharp decline in the share of imports, while exports have increased by 89%. Let us now look at top 5 exported products from Georgia to USA. Ferroalloys, which is 19.6 million USD, natural grape wines 2.9 million USD, flying machines 2.69 million USD, pipes, tubes, and hollow profiles made of ferrous metal 2.6 million USD, fruit and vegetable juices 2.3 million USD. Imports from the USA amount to over $600 million in 2024. As for the top 5 imported products from USA to Georgia, motor cars 500.9 million USD, nuts and other nuts 7.2 million, cosmetics 2.7 million, food products to 4 million USD, motorcycles and bicycles 2.3 million. The maximum of US-Georgia trade was 2.1 billion in 2023. Last year, the USA was in 4th place in terms of investments. In 2023, 153.5 million USD of direct foreign investment was made from America, which was 13% less than last year. In 2022, an investment of 176.5 million USD came from the USA. According to last year's data, the share of the USA in FDI amounted to 9.6%. According to the data of the National Bank, the USA was in 3rd place with 456.3 million USD in remittances transferred to Georgia in 2023. Last month, for 47.22 million USD was transferred from the USA. And that's all for today. We will meet next Sunday, 11 a.m. sharp. But before that, follow us on BM.G for more news and analysis on business and economics in Georgia, in the region, and beyond.
The Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.